Kurz, ich würde nicht gerne in einem Jahrhundert leben, das kein Kino hat. Da wäre ich wahrscheinlich nicht wirklich überlebensfähig, weil sich Geschichten erzählen aufs Kino hauptsächlich verlagert hat heute. Und Geschichten erzählen ist eine menschliche Eigenschaft, die wir seit Jahrzehntausenden entwickelt haben. Und eine ganz besondere menschliche Eigenschaft ist, die uns von den Kühen auf der Weide unterscheidet. Das heißt, why Cinema Now erübrigt sich überhaupt zu fragen, Geschichten erzählen findet dort statt und deswegen wird Kino mit Sicherheit überleben und seinen richtigen Platz haben. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to show you this clip from a Fred Astaire film. I even forgot the title of the film. After this here we should all go home, close the cinema for a month and then start over again. So these things happen in cinema, and I love these moments because it is quintessential cinema. It is just light and shadow and dancing or movement, and something very, very intelligent how it is made. And I would also like to point out that, of course, here you have an early cinema effect. The shadows, of course, is a back projection, and all of a sudden the shadows take on their own lives. So it is a very, very remarkable piece of cinema, and showing that, I think I wouldn't be necessary anymore for the film students.
But one would say that this movie, this period of cinema, was made for entertainment. I mean,
cinema is always entertainment.
Mm-hmm. So
it's not the instrument of torture.
So why so many books about your work? So why so many articles written about you? Why so many?
I have not wanted the articles and the books about me. It would be much better if they didn't exist. I do not want to hear complaints anymore. Everybody is in complaints. Yeah, nobody wants to have my films. So what? You have to acquire a camera somehow, and there's no excuses anymore. There's no lament anymore. No culture of complaint that I would accept. You have to go out and you have to do it. So that's one of the basic things you have to know about your profession. And it will be a complicated life that you will have. It will be a life full of humiliations and defeats. And you will eventually also accomplish something, and you will give significance, or you will give meaning to your lives if you do it the right way. So I cannot be too encouraging, because you have to accept what is waiting out there for you.
But finding a camera is the simplest part of the whole thing. What else do you think one would need to make good cinema, or I don't know, great even at a certain point?
There's no recipe to it. Like, I cannot tell you how do you become a poet. I can tell you how to use a typewriter, but I cannot tell you how to become a poet. Understanding a camera, understanding the basics of editing, understanding the basics of storytelling, understanding the basics of a laboratory that develops your film if you are in celluloid. And my advice is stick to celluloid as long as you can, or if you can at all, because celluloid is the mother of all battles. And celluloid projected onto a screen in a theater again is the second mother of all battles. So, but if you cannot shoot in celluloid, shoot in digital because it has certain advantages. It still is not as good as celluloid. So, and as long as I can stay a man of celluloid, I prefer to shoot on celluloid. It's okay when you are discussing your film with your friends and they say, I don't like this, I don't like that, because it's on a more personalized and less anonymous level. But of course, for me, the first 10 years of making films, I had hardly any success at all. I remember Signs of Life, which I made here, my first feature film, which had, by the way, very, very good reviews. And it won an award at the Berlin Film Festival. So it had instant recognition in the media. That was totally unusual. However, when the film was shown to audiences, nobody came. Not one person, or hardly anyone. I remember that there was a screening in Frankfurt or Wiesbaden, and the local paper had written a full page on the film. And the theater was so enthusiastic that they invited me, take a train quickly and come to Wiesbaden and do a Q&A to re-release the film and re-release it later. And at the time, of course, it was very, very bitter to see it, a film that has cost so much toil, so many risks, and for about 10 years I was working almost like into a void. In my case, I was very, very lucky that I had a mentor, Lotte Eisner, who was a very eminent film historian and writer. And Lotte, for example, alerted Fritz Lang to my films. Because Fritz Lang, who lived in Los Angeles, said there will be never any good cinema ever again in Germany, and he was totally convinced. So I shot it 6 times over, 6 times until I had it right. What is also quite strange and unusual is at the end, behind him there's a bridge across the Mekong River into Laos. At the end of the story, I said, when you end your story, turn your head into profile and look up to the bridge, and he forgets it. So next time from behind the camera, I made a signal for him and he slowly turned around, which was really wonderful because it's a very mysterious moment. After he has told this incredible story, as if he was still absorbing it, he turns his head away and looks at the bridge. And then I continued shooting 2 hours later when it was almost dark and the lights on the bridge were going on. And I cut it together as if he was still thinking for the next 2-3 hours. It's completely stylized, completely fabricated, and yet it gives a very deep truth about his story and about this experience. And when he turns his head, music starts. So it's a very, very stylized moment. Audiences officially now start to recognize the humor in many of my films. When you look at the film that was shown here last night, Encounters at the End of the World, of course it has a lot of humor in it, or Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans is a film where people immediately respond to a very stark, subversive humor. So, and people always always believe, yeah, he's this German and obsessed and gloomy. No, I'm not. I have a sense of humor, but it is probably a different humor from what you would see in an Eddie Murphy movie, for example. They are fine films. So it's a different humor than in slapstick. However, I feel fairly close to Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton is very, very close to my heart. Such a tragic man, a solitary, tragic man, and his last resort as a response to the hostility of the world is his humor. So it's a way of humor that is a little bit closer to my heart, and I in a way, I feel very closely connected to him, although I cannot describe precisely what the connection is. And they still manage to make fairly good films. If you are, for example, someone who is very much into the technical side, let's say digital effects, and you are really good in this and imaginative in digital effects, I think in some way you can learn a lot of that, and skill can be accumulated, and you can manage some of that stuff. But poetry, and it occurs in cinema once in a while, poetry is not a skill that you can learn. You will sense it, that there's something in you, and you will sense that there's an urgency to tell a story to an audience. If you do not have this urgency, the skills do not help you beyond a certain point. No, they were not in the screenplay. I changed a lot in the screenplay and these animals, and I always like to have important roles for animals in my films. I like to direct them, and the iguanas in particular are completely demented. They are like a demented vision under drugs. And since I had no experiences with drugs ever in my life, I just wanted to find an image for it, which came from my own imagination. So within 1 or 2 days I had some iguanas, and I liked these two. Actually, the second animal is not an iguana, it's a desert lizard, very aggressive, really aggressive animal that bit my thumb, and I couldn't get it off my thumb. And and in order to show a different stylization in images, I did not want the cinematographer to film it. I filmed it myself. And there's a tiny camera with a fiber optic cable connected to a recording deck. And I moved the lens of the camera only millimeters away from the skin of the animal and to the eyes. And this gives this very, very strange effect. And the light that I put, so that I have a glare of light into the frame, gives it a strange, demented dimension. So, and of course it is very hilarious, and people who see the film immediately talk about this, about the iguanas. However, you should not forget that all this is without real power if I didn't have this extraordinary music with it. So my buddy said, "Come on, sing, and we'll close our ears." And so after 50 minutes or so, I sang a song, and I knew I would never sing again in my life, which I have not done. And and I was almost like an autistic child in music class. I was physically present, but I did not hear, I did not see. And for 5 years, where you normally have your formative years in music, were completely past for me. I heard no music at all. The moment I was out of school, there was this immediate hunger for music, this the void that opened up, and I started to listen to music and made my own discoveries in a very strange way, from early music on to much later. Forms of distribution are changing dramatically. Much of it is moving into the internet. There is no respect for copyright. There's piracy out there. We do not know how it will end up. Certainly there will be much more over the internet. We can probably download a film on our cell phone and then connect the cell phone to a large plasma screen, for example, and show the film. So we have to see what is going to happen, and certain things are at the horizon already. We can sense what's coming at us, and we have to be prepared for it. So no lament allowed. The world is changing, and we have an incredible dramatic shift, and we have to absorb it. And storytelling is a great gift of the human race, which we have had tens of thousands of years in Paleolithic times, in early Paleolithic times, in caves, sitting around a fire, and storytelling has developed and remained a stable element, and it has remained an element of self-definition of the human race and human culture. And this is what we are not going to lose, no matter which your tools are going to be, no matter what your distribution is going to be. So you have to take it seriously what storytelling means in terms of images. And I'm not worried about it. However, I have been a great opponent of commercials. Because when you see a story on television, every 10 minutes the flow of a story is disrupted by 3 minutes of commercials. Your question is very complex about Nosferatu. In a way, it was an important step for me because I wanted to connect to film culture in Germany, and we had a void of 25 years, almost a quarter of a century, where German culture had mostly sided with the barbarism of the Nazi regime. So we did not have any father figures from whom we could learn. It's much easier for the Greek here because you had a continuity of filmmakers, and you can easily learn from your fathers without being embarrassed. So I wanted to connect in a way to the generation of the grandfathers, and the moment I had done this film, I felt like on solid ground. Lotte Eisner, by the way, was also the bridge who got me in contact with the films, the silent films of the 1920s, Murnau, Fritz Lang, Pabst, and others. So at the same time, I did not want to make a one-to-one remake. It would have been silly.